Julian Phillips, 7th Vol drafted in 5 years. That's a surprising stat from Tennessee basketball, isn't it?
It's a very surprising stat, actually, particularly if you go through history. I think Tennessee had a run. I mean, we're talking from the mid-90s until from 2002 from 2003 to 2011. I don't think they had one player drafted. Not one. Which is crazy to think about.
It is crazy to think about. So let's take a moment and ask ourselves the question. And Caleb is actually more anti-Rick Barnes than he is pro-LSU. And that is Rick Barnes underappreciated? I mean, he's developing talent. Players look at that. I mean, who cares what they do in the NBA if you're a Tennessee fan, right? Players, I think, want to stay and play for him. I don't think we've ever questioned if they played hard. They played tough on defense. We can question a lot of things about Rick Barnes, but is he a little bit underappreciated?
No, he's what we knew he was. Rick Barnes is the David Cutcliffe of basketball. You will be developed for the NBA if you play for Rick Barnes. If you want to develop for the NBA, if you're a 3-star French, 4-star right around that area, and you go play for Rick Barnes, after 3 years, he'll develop you into an NBA prospect, a.k.a. Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield, people like that. Where he comes up short a little bit is schematics and a little bit of X's and O's because he sticks to a certain style and a certain philosophy. But if you are somebody who wants, put it this way, if you want Tennessee basketball to be a school that looks out for the welfare of the players that come through the school and puts them in the best positions going forward, which I guess theoretically is what college is about anyway, Rick Barnes is your guy. If you want Tennessee basketball to win a national championship, he's not your best guy.
Let me stop you on one thing you said. David Cutcliffe wins a championship if he's the head coach of the programs with the support like Rick Barnes has had. If he's the longtime coach at Texas and Tennessee, I believe at some point David Cutcliffe over the course of a 25-year career wins a national title.
Do you think David, he wasn't that big of a recruiter though, was he? From what I understood, he wasn't that dedicated to recruiting.
It wasn't asked to be. He was just asked to get the quarterbacks. It was a really unique setup in that Fulmer did most of the recruiting. But no, I do think he wins a champion. You got to remember, he was in a pro style sense, he was pretty far ahead of the game and what he was doing and the jab step and the way he would train quarterbacks to look guys open. I think he would have won a national title. But
well, I think Barnes could win a national.
No.
I think Barnes could win a national title. I'm just saying he's not like, okay, you're starting a program in the 90s and you want to win a national title. Are you hiring Steve Spurrier or David Cutcliffe?
Well, I'm hiring Steve Spurrier.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm hiring Steve Spurrier. I mean, but that's the Mona Lisa versus somebody in an
Are you hiring Tom Osborne or David Cutcliffe? Oh, come on, Dave. Come on.
Oh, okay, Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne. But
are you hiring Josh Heupel? And now are you hiring Josh Heupel today or David Cutcliffe back then?
Okay, that's an interesting question that you went there. I would hire David Cutcliffe if they're both coordinators at the same spot. Heupel coming out of Oklahoma, Cutcliffe coming out of Tennessee, and they're both there on the table, same age, no health issue. I would hire Cutcliffe.
I think my money would be on Heupel to win a national title as a head coach before Cutcliffe. Cutcliffe is solid schematically, but it was about player development with Cutcliffe. Heupel doesn't necessarily, this isn't a knock on Heupel, this is a scheme. Heupel doesn't necessarily prepare you for the NFL as a player. The same way, by the way, I'll give you, to take it back to basketball, Rick Barnes versus Bruce Pearl. Rick Barnes is developing Tennessee players better for the NBA. That's why you have 7 players getting drafted in 5 years. Bruce Pearl didn't have anybody get drafted his whole run at Tennessee because Bruce Pearl ran a system. Now, the system made Bruce Pearl more successful than Rick Barnes, but it did not prepare players for the NBA the way Rick Barnes prepares players for the NBA.
Now, while I get beat up on the message board, and by the way, Fred can't join us today because he's actually working. He is in a golf tournament, T. Martin's golf tournament. So he's lining up Celebrate 98 guests. So we gave him the day off. So sorry about no Fred today, but he apologizes. I'm not saying that I would be right, but just given the resumes at the time, I would go with Cutcliffe.
Okay, but that wasn't the question though. Now you're cheating and you're changing the rules. Okay, I'm saying based on what you know right now about both coaches, who would you rather be the head coach, Josh Heupel or David Cutcliffe?
What I know right now in June 2023, Josh Heupel.
Yes, because even though you would trust David Cutcliffe to develop quarterbacks for the NFL better than Josh Heupel. And I would too, but you would still hire Josh Heupel because Josh Heupel's better schematically.
I don't think you give David Cutcliffe enough credit for what he did in turning. There are a lot of coaches, and Josh Heupel may be one of them. I don't know, but that would look at an offense that is built to run the football and say, heck no, I'm going to throw it all over the park. Steve Spurrier was that guy. I think you're underestimating and undervaluing David Cutcliffe going from 97 to 98 and saying, I'm going to be a run the football team. That was against his innermost feelings about the game that he grew up playing.
David Cutcliffe was an amazing adapter to talent. I agree. He was a good offensive coach, X's and O's wise. He was not the cream of the crop, though. That's what I'm saying. That's why he's where Rick Barnes is. I think Rick Barnes is good, X's and O's. I just don't think he's the cream of the crop. I mean, X's and O's, like, out scheming. I never put Cutcliffe on Spurrier's level. I never put him on Heupel's level. You know, I actually, looking back, maybe I would put him on Osborne's level because I don't think Osborne's really out schemed anybody. He just wasn't it the same play every time with Osborne? Just the quarterback makes the decision on whether or not to pitch it or run with it.
Well, a little clarification. I'm talking cut after 98. Remember when he went to Ole Miss? So if I'm Ole Miss and I got Josh Heupel and I got David Cutcliffe sitting there as Heupel coming from Mizzou, this is before UCF, okay? Then nobody has head coaching experience because that's a big factor. Then I'm going Cutcliffe. You would too. Are you telling me?
Based on that resume, no, based on that resume, yes, I'm going Cutcliffe. But I mean, I was still there would be remember this. I know it was the 90s, a different time, but there's a bit of a red flag. Don't you think that Cutcliffe was offensive coordinator for 6 years before he got a job? It took him 6 years before he got hired as a head coaching job. And I think personally, people watched those Tennessee-Florida games and they thought Tennessee was so far behind Florida in scheme that I think that was held against Cutcliffe.
I'll tell you why that is. You want me to tell you why that is?
Yeah, go ahead and tell me.
First, I'll tell you AndyMasonRealEstate.com. AndyMasonRealEstate.com will save you thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. He's my realtor. He should be yours. Tell him Off the Hook Sports sent you and that you want the best service and the best prices in the biz because that's what he offers. Over 40 years of experience. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Fantastic realtor in East Tennessee. It's because Philip Fulmer was such a great offensive mind.
That's the funniest joke you told all day. That's the best joke you told all day.
Might be, maybe in my career. There's a chance of that.
Gosh.
No, I think David Cutcliffe got passed over a lot because I do think Philip Fulmer is highly respected as an offensive line coach. And you got to think, too, back then it wasn't about developing the Hendon Hookers or the Peyton Mannings or whatever. It was about putting a fantastic offensive line together. Back then, we thought that I mean, I said it in jest, and I was joking, but if you had a guy that could put together an incredible offensive line and was a great recruiter, that was considered a great offensive coach. And Philip Fulmer did that, and he worked like heck. I've got that drop somewhere. We worked like heck. And he worked like
how many times did you hear that, Dave, in press conference?
He did the hand pat.
Oh yes, the clap. Oh my gosh.
Some people hated the clap. Well,
I actually didn't.
Yes. Yeah. People with my last name hate the clap, I would imagine.
Oh Lord. I didn't mind the clap. I felt like that was where Fulmer was at his best, where he knew how to keep his.
You just said I didn't mind the clap, but that's okay. Just a
No, I said I
just a
didn't. Oh,
right, just a penicillin shot and you're
oh
okay.
my gosh. Okay, I
Good
did
to
not
know
mind
that about
Fulmer's.
Caleb.
I did.
Completely off the rails.
I
All
did
right.
not mind Fulmer's clapping because I felt that he was doing a good job trying to keep his players composed. I mean, Philip Fulmer was very much the team. Philip Fulmer very much lived by Nealon's second maxim. If at first the breaks go against you, don't let up. What is it? If at first the breaks don't go your way, put on more
Yes.
steam. And
Right.
Fulmer was very
And
much
and
about that.
I'm a big fan of being, as a parent, being supportive when things aren't going well, and maybe being a little bit harder when things are going well. So I got what he was doing there, and it didn't bother me. But man, it just absolutely drove some people crazy. Rocky Top Tom, nice enough to say that as long as it doesn't progress, the clap is not the end of the world. So that's all he was doing is clapping.
This is gonna go way
And
off the
Al
rails.
Capone would argue that. Okay, so going back to something we said earlier before we move on, D said Nico can't win a Heisman if his offensive lineman can't block. He can't hold on to the football for the running backs or catch the ball for the receiver. So we were talking about expectations earlier for Nico. And the simple fact is, it is a team game. It's not fair. But ultimately, Bryce Young in the NFL is going to be judged if he wins Super Bowls as a quarterback. Tom Brady is judged as the best ever. When you brought up great points why Peyton Manning should be considered the best ever, because I do think he changed the game much more than Tom Brady. But at the end of the day, titles, team success shouldn't be a quarterback stat, but it just is. And I think that Nico, that's going to be tied to him. I mean, guys, if he doesn't win the SEC East, if Tennessee I think this is the worst case scenario. Tennessee stumbles into the college football playoff once and he doesn't make it. Let's say he plays 3 full years after this year and they only make the college football playoff once. I don't think anybody's looking back at the Nico era saying this is a great thing. I mean, the expectations are different than the Joshua Dobbs of the world, right?
Much different. Much different. And by the way, that's another quarterback that is actually a pretty good fit for Mike DeBoer's system, but then things kind of went off the rails. But talk about single-handedly keeping a coach afloat. There's Josh Dobbs with Butch Jones, and I'm going to say it. Josh Dobbs was Tennessee's modern-day Condrich Holloway, who kept Bill Battle's job afloat. Bill Battle would have been fired years before if Condrich Holloway wasn't there, delaying the fall off of the program.
Yeah, I wonder if Butch Jones has ever called Joshua Dobbs and said, "Hey, do you care to come by Arkansas State and help me recruit?" I'm not even joking. I guarantee you he has that type of gall. I guarantee you he's called. And he said, I developed you as a quarterback and did a great job. When in all reality, we all know that Joshua Dobbs was paddling his kayak upstream. I mean, that was, for him to be something today, in my mind, still Caleb is amazing given the coaching he had.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I will never forget Joshua Dobbs, his last regular season game. He won the bowl game, but he lost his last regular season game at Vanderbilt, which cost Tennessee a shot at a New Year's Six bowl. And I will never forget the broadcaster. Dobbs completed his first 15 passes in that game. And Tennessee lost because the secondary couldn't stop anybody. And you finally started to see Dobbs get frustrated in the fourth quarter. And I will never forget the broadcaster, and I don't want to call him out, and I wouldn't anyway, but I don't know his name anyway. He kept saying, just these leadership things of Dobbs. You see this here, these leadership issues. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing because I thought Joshua Dobbs was a great leader. And I think just at that point, I think it would wear anybody down. I don't care how great you are. Eventually you get worn down by the ineptitude surrounding you if you keep trying to carry them.
And on the message board, D says he could be Fran Tarkington great or Dan Marino or Dan Fouts. You're absolutely right. And I would hope that we would remember him like that. But a lot of people won't. A lot of people still, what's the first thing out of their mouth if they want to say something bad about Peyton Manning? Because he had 2 things. He had the Florida thing and he had the clutch thing, right?
A lot of the clutch thing was stupid for anybody who did. It's only for people who didn't follow college football that didn't.
I agree.
Clutch.
And you win 2 Super Bowls and that goes out the door. You got to be somewhat clutch to win 2 Super Bowls. But the Florida thing still comes out there. Like how many times did he beat Florida? And now he gets kind of misremembered as he beat them once. No, he didn't.
And by the way, also lazy because no one ever brings up the fact that Tennessee's defense gave up 41 points and a half to Florida in 1995. You probably remember that game, right? That they lost 62-30, whatever. Peyton Manning spotted them a 30-14 lead, and the defense gave up 48 unanswered.